listeners and viewers, to another week of Education, the Teachers Talking Terror podcast, where you find myself, Mike,
and myself, Courtney,
are back to discuss another horror film, the first one when we're back on our teaching schedule, which I don't know about you, but I was a sleepy bear this last week. I get home and I'm just like, oh, my body was not ready for working all day. I know it's first world problems, but so be it. But yeah, we're back to put the final. This will be the final movie in our initial run through of a rotation. If you're new to the show, just to kind of remind you that we just kind of went scattershot forever, not really knowing any kind of routine or rotation. So within about 4 weeks ago, we decided we'll rotate that. Like I'll bring a movie and you'll bring a movie, and then we've got a 100 horror movie poster that we need to cover through, and then we'll just shuffle through one. We'll pick one at random, and so this was the pick at random movie, which happened to be satisfying two parts. Not only to satisfy a random movie, but it also took a movie off your plate. So. Yep. Win-win there. We are covering 1987's Hellraiser, the Clive Barker screenplay written, directed by. Clive Barker's all over this. This movie is based on a book that, like a novella that Clive Barker, the director, wrote called The Hellbound Heart. He wrote that, and this is his directorial debut, Clive Barker. He has earned himself a right in the horror-minded kind of guy. He's not at the level of a Stephen King, but he's got a lot of material out there that kind of falls into this realm of kind of supernatural, kind of not, kind of gross, kind of not. And so this being his directorial debut, and it spawned like a ton of sequels, a remake, like a reboot last year. So yeah, this is definitely earned its legs. Hellraiser, especially our lead Cenobite Pinhead, which was never Clive Barker's intention. And so once it gets in on a mainstream, it's really kind of like it's no longer your project. So, originally Pinhead's name was the Priest Cenobite, and everyone's like, hey, it's Pinhead. And so now that's what he's called. He's called Pinhead. So, but Hellraiser, without grading, like, I had a feeling you would like this. So.
Yes, I did like it. Actually, Casey watched this movie with me.
Did he?
Not by choice, really. I was watching it in bed, and he crawled in bed, and I was like, I'm leaving it on so you can watch it or not watch it. And so he ended up watching it with me. I liked it, but the reason it was on my list is because I remember when I was young, like I want to say like 5th grade, I went to this like haunted trail thing, and I just remember Pinhead, and like it, I don't know, like it, like I can still visualize it. I don't remember where it was. I do remember I went with my cousin Allison, and there was just Pinhead standing there just staring at me. Yeah. And it seriously scared the life out of me. But the movie's not what I thought it would be.
No, it's not scary.
Right. Like it's gory, but like seeing him, I was just like, oh, okay, like I don't know. I thought maybe he like tortured people.
Right. Now, again, last week when we shuffled, we landed on Hellbound Hellraiser 2, which I've not seen. But from what I understand, because of the popularity of Pinhead and the Cenobites in this one, they were just kind of secondary figures.
Yeah.
But they became so popular that, from what I understand, like pretty much the rest of the franchise does feature them as like front and center villains.
Okay.
So
yeah, because like I thought maybe like
he was the
Pinhead,
monster.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, if you've seen this, like he's he is, but he's not.
Yeah.
And so,
He's
yeah,
almo-
it was
yeah,
just,
it's
it was
yeah.
a lot different than what I came in expecting.
Yeah, especially coming out there in the later portion of the 80s. Like, at this point, you have several Michael Myers movies, you have several Jason movies, you have several Freddy Krueger movies. And so at this point, he gets kind of wrapped up into like, oh, there's the next movie monster.
Yeah.
There's the next big bad guy. But he's not a good guy, but he's not a bad guy. He's almost he feels almost like bounty hunter-esque.
Yeah.
Like you're not supposed to be, or you're somewhere you're not supposed to be, and we've come to get you.
Yep.
So, but no, I'm glad you liked it. Like, we've talked several times before that when it comes to horror movies, like, I know myself, I really enjoy a good story. And if there's not a solid story structure, but there's plenty of like creative deaths and gore, I'm fine with it. There isn't a whole lot anymore that I feel really like rattles my chains in terms of scaring me. But this movie, to me, is satisfying because it does have an interesting storyline, and of course the gore is just top notch in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I told you it's very gooey. It's a very gooey movie.
Yeah. At the end, Casey's like, "You guys watch some weird movies. Like, that wasn't even scary." And I'm like, Casey, there's a difference between scary and horror. I'm like, not every movie is scary.
Right.
Like,
yeah, nothing in this movie startles you. And we've talked about that a lot too, of
I mean, so we did jump once.
So many people, in your generation and current, they really chalk a horror movie's effectiveness up to how often am I startled?
Yes. How
often does something jump out at me? How often did I jump? And while those are effective, but they wear out. They just wear out over time. Because it's not really scary. You don't. Now, this also isn't a movie that like you would turn it off and then like have bad dreams about that happening to you. But it's still, it's definitely horror.
Right.
And some people just have to find that right definition for themselves. Mm-hmm. This movie kicks off just kind of out of nowhere, randomly. We have Frank, and naturally he's in like Morocco. Like it's always some like just like far off place. It's never like Iowa.
Right.
Frank is at the Walmart. No, he's in Morocco, and we see him buying a puzzle box, kind of a Pandora's box type of situation. He doesn't really know what's a puzzle box yet, but he takes it home, and we don't know this quite yet about Frank, but Frank gets off on some very interesting things. He's a different kind of guy, and we find that out more as the movie goes along. But Frank goes home and opens the puzzle box, and then like lights kick in and hooks and chains. Like he's transported somewhere else, but he's still in his attic. It's kind of a cool effect. There's hooks and chains that are just like sinking into his skin, and just stretching it, pulling it, ripping him. And like it just rips him apart. Just this dark figure comes in and like starts putting his destroyed facial pieces back together. I wasn't aware that if your face gets ripped apart, your eyes are stuck to your eye sockets. When they were piecing the puzzle of his face back together, it was like, oh, even my wife was like, oh, so your eyes stay there. And so the black figure like resets the puzzle box, and whoosh, everything's just back to normal. Like, except Frank's not there. Like, he's just, he was there, now he's gone.
Yeah, and it's now just an empty room.
Yeah, and that's how the movie starts. Like, it's not really a cold open, but you don't have a clue what's going on.
Right.
Not a clue.
No.
Which does, if done right, can grab your attention. And if done incorrectly, I feel could completely lose the viewer, because if they're that confused from the start, then they may not be worth going on the journey. But with this many sequels, I think this movie did it right.
Yeah. And the way the hooks just like sunk into his
Yeah.
skin. My biggest fear, because Casey's a big fisherman,
Oh.
my biggest fear when fishing is like getting hooked.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it, and it's just like, oh, oof.
Yep.
The way that they just sunk right in.
Yeah, I will say, while the effects of this movie are solid, like I really do think they did a good job. This movie does unfortunately suffer from being made in 1987 but being watched in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
When the pinnacle of home media was like VHS tapes, which were real grainy and not the highest of quality, but the best you had. I'm sure like those hooks sinking into his flesh probably looked more realistic than they do in high definition. You can tell it's just very rubbery fake skin, but you know, you got to let that go, because that's,
you can still imagine.
Yeah, it's not their fault we watched this movie 35 years later. Yeah. And so we now meet Frank's brother, Larry, who is kind of a nerd. Like I think he's a decent family man, but I get the idea that he probably like sells homeowners insurance or something like that. Like
Frank was definitely like the better looking kind of like bad boy brother.
Oh, for sure.
And Larry is just like your basic American dad type.
Which these two aren't brothers. Like, let's not kid ourselves. You put these two actors next to each other, you're not convinced. They live
nothing alike.
Yeah, they're not nothing. They're not cut from the same womb. So, well, we meet Larry. And he's moving. He and his wife, Julia, his second wife, Julia, are moving into the same house. The movie tries really, really hard to make Julia a sexy woman.
Yeah, and I just struggled. Like when she's bringing home all these people, I'm just like, guys.
Yeah.
Like, you could have hired a lot of other actresses at the time.
I'm not going to shame her. Like, that's not fair. But
I've just seen much sexier
women.
women.
And especially, even in the 80s, like,
yes,
like you get the idea that, and we'll come back to this, but like when she goes to these bars to pick up these men, like she's dressed like in power suits and shoulder pads, and it's like, you're not dressed like you're out for female or for physical attention. You're dressed like you're on your lunch break from your CEO office. But whatever. Some reason Larry and Julia are having a rough time. They move into the house. Julia's not on board with moving into the house.
No.
I can't say I blame her.
I can't either. Like, for how big it is, it's very just like chopped up.
Yes.
It's dirty because it's been sitting.
Right.
I mean,
well,
there's maggots.
Yeah, Larry knows that Frank had lived there, but he hasn't seen Frank in so long that he just assumes. But he knows his brother as well, that like, this is Frank. He just skips out on everything.
Correct.
But Larry is also unaware that Julia had a fairly lengthy affair with Frank before she got married to Larry. So in some ways, it's like, it's not really an affair if you weren't married yet. I got the vibe that they probably were married, but then that didn't really make sense either. Like,
yeah, because like at one point they were like having an affair on her wedding dress.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just kind of like,
right.
I don't know.
So Julia has memories in the home that Larry's not aware of. Larry, they're walking around. Larry realizes, because the kitchen is a disaster, like moldy food and bugs. It's like, so Larry is like, Frank's been here. Like, he's been here more recently than I thought. Of course, we know where Frank's gone.
Yeah.
But Frank, you almost get the vibe, and it draws comparisons, in my mind anyway, to kind of like Barbarian, where the girl that gets like kidnapped by the mother, and then we fast forward to like 2 weeks later, and and like the Airbnb owner shows back up, and it's like she's been living underneath the house and captive for like 2 weeks, And it was like, how did that happen? Like, same thing. Like, we don't know how long Frank's been gone, but he's been there recent enough that the residue is there. Like, and you could tell, like, I've never done drugs, so I don't know how far, like, it goes to be like the junkie state, but Frank is, whatever he was up to before the puzzle box was deep end. Like,
yes,
he was, like, the flashbacks with Julia, like, they're having their affair, like, in a bed, and it's like now he's literally just like this grungy, nasty mattress on the floor.
Yeah, like it's like at one point they're like squatters.
Yeah,
and it's like, no, Frank.
Yeah, it's like whatever deep end that he dove off of, he found an even deeper end at the bottom. So Julia's up in the attic where she's reminiscing about Frank and how aggressive and masculine he is compared to Larry. Larry's trying to move a mattress upstairs with the moving guys, and we see it coming like 30 seconds before it happens. But nonetheless, it looked painful as he drags the back of his hand across an exposed nail head. It just tears open the flesh.
Yeah.
And he must be on some kind of blood thinner.
Right.
Because Larry is just dripping blood. Like, he can't even begin to stop it from flowing. So he heads up to the attic where Julia's at, drips blood all over the floor in slow motion. Well, somehow it resurrects Frank.
Yeah, but like not fully.
No, not yet. No, but it's just enough blood to somehow bring Frank back from beyond, where he's not dead, but just from the beyond. Whatever the puzzle box sucked him into. Then we find out Julia's a freak too.
Yeah.
Like, it's one thing to, like, be into Frank and then pivot and marry Larry. But it's another thing to find... First of all, when Frank gets resurrected, I feel like this resurrection scene was sponsored by Krispy Kreme. Because the amount of like, glaze and gooiness... I've always been impressed with that. Just complete physical effects of bringing him up out of the floor, all skeletal, and I love 80s special effects. I just think they're so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty gross and gooey. Watching his fingers, it was just, I don't know, it's pretty cool.
They're like spawning out from this like little, and then at one point I'm like, what is that? Like, it looked like almost like a little U shape. Right. And then I was like, oh, as it connects to his brain. I'm like, that's his spinal cord. Like, ooh.
Yeah. Like there was some attention to detail going on.
Yeah, very much. Yes.
Julia pops back into the attic and finds Frank, who is clearly like, he's not even, I don't even think he's not even muscular yet. He's just like,
yeah, this is just like his tissues and like blood vessels.
It's like the furthest development he has is the mucous membranes in his body. Like, everything is white and very skeletal, but really wet. And it's just gross looking. But you could tell that it was applied makeup to a human, though. This wasn't a puppet. They weren't using puppeteers. This was some guy in makeup acting this out. Julia realizes that it's Frank, and this is where the freak side comes in. Doesn't freak out. Nope. No. She instead is like, Frank, is that you? Almost like, oh my gosh, let's do this again.
Yeah, like
me,
she's obsessed.
Me, you, the addict. Let's do it. And he's like, not yet. I can't do it yet. I need more. Basically, I need more bodies. Like,
yeah.
And Julia's like, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
And so she starts going out to bars. Like we were talking about earlier. She just goes to bars and brings guys back.
Yeah, she just kind of goes on this little bender,
Right.
yeah, I'm lonely. Come up to my attic,
Right.
and up to the attic they go, and she
Right.
just brutally,
Yeah.
at least the third one was a little I don't know, but the first two, they just are heck yeah, let's go to the attic, let's go on up here.
Yeah, it was, it's something my wife and I joked about too, is because we know the bedroom is on the left. Because there's basically two doors once you get to this top landing. There's a door to the left to a bedroom, a door to the right to the attic, it's just this giant empty box of a room that's just gross. It's not even, I mean, it just looks like an attic.
Uh-huh.
But it's she opens the door and these guys look out here and there's no bed, there's no furniture, there's no nothing. It's just hard plank wood floors. And these guys are like, all right, whatever, I'm into it. And it's and of course, Julia has no desire to be with any of these men. And so she takes a claw hammer and just places it in the back of their skull. But she never kills them. I don't know enough about it, but I would think that if I got bashed in the back of the head by a hammer, whether it be the nail end or the claw end, I'm hurting. I'm probably twitching. These guys are just ow.
Yeah. What happened?
But then Frank comes out and does the rest. Basically drains them of their life. He takes his fingers and puts them into their necks. And it just drains the life out of them.
And it just kind of transfers to him.
Yeah. Every time he does it, he does regenerate more and more. Which, again, cool special effects, because we see him as that mucusy white skeletal thing. And then the next time he's got muscle tissue. And it's each time we see him, he's come more and more life, more and more.
Yeah.
Ow. I guess
his layers kind of.
I don't want to say lifelike because he's alive.
Right.
Yeah.
He looks more human-like.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we have gone through, X amount of bodies.
Yes.
And this kind of is where, Kirsty, Larry's daughter, kind of comes in.
Yeah. She'd popped in earlier a little bit of Dad, I'm in town. And he's like, well, come on by the house. She's like, I'm good. We get the vibe Kirsty doesn't like Julia and vice versa.
Right. And so Frank describes or explains how he got to where he is to Julia, and he just talks about how he did this puzzle, and then when they solved it, these Cenobites came, and they just took him and just tortured him.
Right. But
and he's escaped.
Yeah, but at the same time, Frank he's constantly chasing the next high is basically what it is. But it's not drug based. And so for him, it was, we see Julia find his pictures. He's got a series of Polaroids where he's with just all kinds of various women. And, it's he's just constantly chasing that next high. And for him, this puzzle box was that next high. And now it's too high for him. It was too high.
Yeah.
And so, we did meet Kirsty earlier, like I mentioned. And so she, a little distant. Larry has no idea any of this is going on upstairs.
Right. He's just man, Julia really doesn't like moving. She won't even leave the house. Kirsty, you should maybe go check on her.
Right.
Maybe you should. You're the husband.
Exactly. Right. And he's trying to get them to bridge their relationship, which honestly, I'm curious how the Larry and Julia thing even started.
Yeah, I know.
It just, I don't know. So Kirsty does come check on Julia. But when she shows up, she sees her taking a man into the house, which we know what they're doing. But of course, I'm sure from Julia or from Kirsty's perspective, it looks like, she's stepping out on Dad. Mm-hmm. So she then helps herself into the house, follows upstairs, and she doesn't go into the attic. like she's standing up at the top of the landing. Julia comes out of the attic room covered in blood. But then Frank steps out there too. And he even was like, Kirsty, you know, like, because it's her uncle.
Yeah.
Like, that's, you know, and he's like, almost like, hey, Kirsty, it's me, Uncle Frank. Like, hey, how are you, girl?
Like, yeah, like, why are you stepping away from me? And he's got this catchphrase that is just like, ew.
Yeah. Yes.
Where he's like, come to daddy. And it's
especially
like,
when it's, when
it's your niece.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I get where he's coming. Like, honestly, when Frank saw her, I really was not fearing for Kirsty. Like, right. I really think, like, Larry or Frank was almost like, I'm almost back. I'm almost whole. Things will be fine. You know, the Cenobites don't know where I am. I've escaped, and it's fine. Like, I'm going to come whole again, and then nobody will even know what happened except Julia. So he does. He sees Kirsty, and he's just like, oh, come here. Come. You know, but then again, because he's just this creep of, like you said, come to daddy. And it's like, oh, it's your niece, dude. So, of course, she runs. But she does get a hold of the puzzle box.
Correct.
Yeah. And so she... she ends up in the hospital.
I mean, she's running. Yeah. And she's like, almost, I want to say like, kind of like in a maybe like the psych unit of a hospital, because she's not like tied down or anything like a psych ward, but like there's nothing in her room at all. Yeah. But they probably, I mean, filmmaking wise, they probably didn't film in a hospital either. It's probably just like we painted this room and stuck her in it. You know, the budget for this movie is only like $1 million. And so the effects are pretty good considering the budget. Yeah, so Kirsty wakes up. She's in the hospital. Like, the doctors and nurses, like, just their idea of checking on her is like peeking in the room and then leaving. Like, they give zero medical attention whatsoever. But whatever. Like, that's but they left her with the puzzle box because why wouldn't you? You know, if you see somebody and they've collapsed but they're clutching a toy, like if they've got a Rubik's Cube, you don't take the Rubik's Cube from them. They need it. So she in the hospital. Solves the puzzle box. Well, solving is not really the right word. Like, you press a button and then it kind of pulls itself apart and rotates and then you put it back together. Like, it isn't like a Rubik's Cube at all. It's a very simple solve. Yeah,
it's more like, you know, put the peg in the hole kind of thing. So the Cenobites show up no. She solves
a hole in the wall.
Yeah, a hole opens up in the hospital wall. So naturally, Kirsty just goes in and checks it out because that's what the characters in this movie do. And she comes across this giant, like, monster that's called the Engineer, but we never really get that. But this just giant, like, just otherworldly monster.
Yeah, it looked like a big, like, bug.
Yeah.
Kind of. Like,
it almost looked like a mutant anglerfish or something like that. Yeah. You know,
it was gross.
Yeah, it was pretty gross. But it starts chasing her, and then of course, because we know Kirsty's good at running, she does get away from it. She gets back into the hospital room and that thing shuts off behind her. But the Cenobites show up and they're talking to her. And I'm thankful for this, even though in some movies it is kind of annoying, and it's very, very common in the 80s movies. We've talked about it before, of how many characters you have in horror films that just drop exposition for you. Yeah. Like Frank did. You know, like, we have no idea what was going on with Frank, and then suddenly he's telling Julia, like, oh, well, I solved the puzzle, and I was taken to this other dimension, and the Cenobites were there, and I escaped from them, and they were tortured. Like, if he didn't tell us that stuff, we'd have no idea.
Yeah.
You know, because we didn't see it. And the same thing with the Cenobites here with Kirsty. They show up and basically, like, you solved the puzzle. Like, we're here for you. Yeah. Because this is what happens when you solve the puzzle box. We come and we take you away, and you basically are tortured sadomasochistically forever.
Because we don't know the difference between pleasure and pain.
We don't know it.
It's all the same.
Yeah. So some view them as angels, some view them as demons. Like he says, we're just explorers. Like this is like the puzzle box is our portal to your world, and if you've solved it, you must have summoned us. So they're like, we're here for you. Like, this is why we're here. And to which Kirsty's like, wait a second. You guys know my Uncle Frank. And naturally, these Cenobites are open to bargaining, I guess.
Yeah.
Because they're like, yeah, Frank escaped us. Where is that guy? You know, like, and she's like, I'll show you where he's at. Only if you spare my life. So Kirsty, she's got some street smarts.
She does.
You know,
Yeah.
I think had I, as a grown man, opened a portal to a wall where this giant bug anglerfish monster was chasing me, and then I talked to a bunch of like S&M junkies, one of which is like his face, like his mouth is like they're just gross looking.
They
like
are.
she's handled this with great poise,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and she's good to go. And so, but yeah, so the point is, I'll take you back. I'll show you where Frank is, and they're like, we'll let you go as long as Frank confesses that he escaped.
Yes, there's only one catch there is he has to confess.
He's got to confess.
So she goes home.
Yeah.
And her dad, Larry, he meets her at the door, or as far as she knows, and she's like, oh, like, I mean, she's hugging him. She's like, Daddy, I was so worried for you. And then he slips up and he's like, come to Daddy, where it's then revealed that Frank has taken like his last, quote unquote, last step to becoming human. And he's now wearing Larry's skin. Yeah. And you can tell like in the back, like it's all bloody.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
It's forming.
Like the first thing, for as street smart as Kirsty's been thus far, the first thing that tipped her off that something's wrong was the come to Daddy line. It wasn't the fact that your dad just looked like he dyed his hair with ketchup. Like you're right. Like, because he's got a white collared shirt on and everything is just covered in blood.
I'm like, I guess she was just too distracted to notice.
Guess so.
Like, she was just so thankful to see her dad's face that she's like, whatever, I don't care. Like, but I mean, they head up to the attic, and that's where Julia shows her like her dad is like filleted like a fish. Yeah. Like everything has been taken off of him.
It's almost like the effect we saw when Frank was coming out of the floor at the beginning. Like this is now Larry's body. Like Frank has everything out of Larry's body that he needed.
And so there's this little like run-in with Frank and Julia, where Julia's got Kirsty in this headlock, and I mean Frank's like, which I did like this. He's like, screw the cat and mouse chase. Like, and I was like, yeah, get right down to it. Except Kirsty escapes and he kills and almost like turns her to stone or something. I don't know. Yeah. But Julia's now gone and Kirsty's hiding. And this is the only part that like made Casey and I jump, like when she opened the thing and like that Jesus statue fell out. Yeah. I was not expecting that. I mean, nobody would expect it on their first time. Yeah. And it was just like, oh my gosh. But yeah, so she's hiding, and some other gross effects as she's hiding, like she hits one of the dead bodies that have been stored in this room, and like it falls forward and like maggots just pour out of its mouth onto her. And
and again, unlike Drag Me to Hell, where it was all like CGI and whatnot, like this is 1987. Yeah. They didn't have CGI maggots to drop on you. Like they literally filled a dummy with something and they poured on to poor Ashley Lawrence, the actress. But Frank doesn't care that Julia's dead. Like he's just trying to get all this cleaned up. And when it's Frank and Kirsty in the attic, and this is where Frank reveals that, yes, I killed your father. Because when the Cenobites showed up early, they showed up in the attic and they saw Larry's body and were already like, who did this? Like whoever did this. Yeah, I skipped that. Whoever did this is who we're looking for. You know, And
she's
so,
like, no, that's my dad.
yeah, like they felt like Kirsty had deceived
Yeah.
them. And she's like, no. And so they're like, who did it? Well, when Frank reveals that he did it, then the Cenobites are there because it's like, aha, we got you. And so, yeah, they like Frank chases her. The Cenobites appear when they hear him confess. So it's back to the hooks and chains and tearing him apart again. Like, you know, he drops this whole like improvised Jesus wept before he just rips his body apart.
Yeah.
Well, then the Cenobites turn their attention on Kirsty. You know, because again, like, we're here, we got to take somebody back.
Yeah.
And you know, and she had opened the puzzle box too. Like it was like she thought they had a deal. You don't make a deal with these people.
Yeah, and I mean, this is where, like I said to Casey, I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Like, demons to some, angels to other. I'm like, they're a demon to him, but like they are her angels because they saved her.
Well,
like,
and in some instances, for some people that if they're really into sadomasochism, then yes, this pleasure, like this pain is my pleasure. You're an angel to me.
Yes.
So, but Kirsty, again, being street smart, grabs the puzzle box out of Julia's hands and like reverses the puzzle, basically putting it back to its original form, which then traps them all back in their dimension.
Yes.
And so good for her, you know, she saved herself. Like, that's what's nice too, is there was no like, you know, like her boyfriend Steve shows up and he was in the movie like twice. Once when we saw him flirting, and once at the end where he's like, hey, what's going on, babe? So the house collapsed, she escapes. We did meet this this really dirty, creepy homeless man earlier in the movie.
Yeah, he was
following her around. Like, she saw him once, and then he showed up at the pet store she works at, and he was just eating crickets.
Yeah.
So Kirsty and Steve, like, they're just walking around out in the. I don't even know where they are. This city gave the vibe of like Detroit to me.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and it may have been Detroit. I may have just missed it, but it just gives me the vibe that like just felt like Detroit.
Well, hey, maybe this is the next road over from.
Maybe, yeah.
Barbarian.
Probably it's just around the corner
because it did have similar vibes.
So she chucks the puzzle box away into a fire. Well, then this homeless guy shows up, and like just walks into the fire to get the puzzle box.
Yeah.
And then he turns into this creature, like this like dragon skeleton thing, and then just flies away. And then we get a nice wraparound where we end up back in Morocco. The same salesman at the beginning that sold it to Frank is selling it to another person. And then we just get the circle continues with this.
Yeah.
And that's Hellraiser. That's Hellraiser. 1987. You said you liked it, which is good.
Yeah, I did. Some of like, I mean, it wasn't really funny, but like some of the Cenobites, like the one reminded me of Jabba the Hutt from Star Wars.
Well, and like his unofficial name is like Butterball. Like there's Chomper, which
and
of
that's
course
the one with like the really
teeth.
big gums. Like Casey was cracking up at him. Like every time he come on the string, Casey was like, arr, arr, arr. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, there's Chomper, there's Butterball, Pinhead, and then I don't remember what the female's name was, but just female Cenobite was. That was pretty much what she's referred to. Poor lady.
I'd rather be called that though than
Chomper,
Butterball.
Right. But yeah, so that's it. What you said you liked it? I liked it.
Yeah.
Let's grade this puppy.
I am gonna go just because like it was kind of confusing without it being explained,
right?
And 99% of these movies I go into with no expectations.
Okay.
Like I don't know what it is, but my expectation for this one I felt like was high, and because it. Again, and I can't even blame the movie, like, but just simply because I really thought that Pinhead was like the torturer.
Gotcha.
it didn't necessarily let me down, but at the same time, it let me down.
Right.
I know that doesn't make sense, but you'll understand.
I think I do. You had expectations on what you thought this movie was going to be, and it ended up not being that.
Yes. And like I've said before, like I do absolutely no research on these because I like to be surprised.
Yeah, right.
But the gore was good, but I'm going to go this one just a flat B because it was just, I mean, I'd watch it again. I'd have no issues with that. But it just, again, like, I was just like, oh, this isn't what I thought.
Right. I like that. Honestly, I'm comfortable giving it a B as well. One thing I was reading is that because this came out in 87, and I mentioned earlier, we have several Michael, Jason, Freddy movies already. In which you've got Michael and Jason as being just silent, stalking killers. You've got Freddy at this point is wisecracker, Bugs Bunny type. And what Clive Barker wanted to do in this film is he wanted to make his quote-unquote monsters. He wanted to make them more like cerebral and intelligent with a purpose. Because if you watch the movie, the Cenobites, like, they didn't just kill whoever's in front of them.
Correct.
It was, we're here because of the puzzle, the box.
You had to invite them.
You open the box, and this is what you get when you open the box. Like, we're just doing our job. And so I will say that as much as I love Michael, Jason, Freddy, I haven't seen any of the Hellraiser sequels, but knowing that our villains are... I'm granted, I've also seen all the other movies, but not of Hellraiser, but of Michael, Jason, Freddy. That I would say I'm more curious of what the Hellraiser sequels look like.
Yeah.
You know, than I am, say, like what Chucky's movies turned out to be.
Correct.
Just because I feel like this first one introduced us to them, and knowing that they're, like I said, there's a huge franchise. I'm like, where are you going?
Mm-hmm.
I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then a relaunch. Are they all good? Absolutely not. I'm certain they're not. There's no way they could be good.
They can't be.
But there still must have been something there to get 10 sequels out of. Yes. And so knowing it's like, okay, you've given me a taste of these guys. I'm curious, like, what's coming? What's next? And maybe that'll be something we shuffle across, or piques our interest as we move forward with picks. But yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to diving into the Hellraiser franchise more. Yeah. Just because I'm curious where they go with it. Yeah. I'm sure that by the time we get to the third one, it may be ridiculous, and we may be like, okay, we've had enough. Yeah. But who knows? Who knows? So yeah, I'm good with a B as well. Lesson. The
lesson. Don't put your nose where it doesn't belong.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. This one is kind of hard because it's like, I mean, really, they didn't do anything wrong in this movie. Like, they just solved a puzzle. Right. They just, like you said, like, they just opened Pandora's box and it was there.
I gotcha. My lesson is going to go a little different direction. My lesson is going to go towards relationship advice. If you're in a relationship and you're working hard to make it work, and you feel like everything you do is uphill, like there's just no connection there, it's okay to cut ties and go. It's okay. Breakups are real, divorce is real, and in many cases, as much as the initial hurt stings and does linger, you get the vibe that in most instances it feels like everybody's a little happier after the divorce is final. Mm-hmm. Everybody's a little happier, because it's like, yeah, you're in a relationship and you don't want to let anybody down, and you definitely don't want to be let down. But if it's something clicked, and that's fine, but sometimes relationships aren't built to last forever. Right. That's okay. Yes. That's okay. Working at the high school, I see it every year. Some girl ends up crying because we broke up. And I always listen if they bring it to me. I let them vent, and I would never spin it on them. But the question I want to ask all of them was, like really any collaboration. Well, where did you see it going?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, breakups hurt, but I mean, how realistically, how far did you see this going?
Yeah, and like it would be awesome to have a high school sweetheart, but it's also like there's so much life after high school.
Mm-hmm. All of it, arguably.
And yeah. And so it's just like if you are a high school sweetheart and you last after high school, amazing.
Especially if it's healthy, because there are times where high school sweetheart relationships hang on just out of the fear of I've never been with anyone else.
Like one of my best friends, I mean, she's been on here, Erica and her husband. I mean, like they high school sweethearts, and like they have the married, extremely healthy relationship. Like kudos to them, but it's like, I agree with you.
Yeah, and it's okay. It's scary. Of course, it's scary. My wife and I have said, before that, we've been married. We've been together 15 years, married for 14. But we're also at a point in our lives where we have what we want.
Yes.
And I've told her, and she's echoed it, that if for some unforeseen reason our marriage were to end, which it won't, but if it did, like I'm single the rest of my life. Like I've peaked with her. She's my favorite person in the entire world. And I don't ever want to try and replace that. Like and just the fear of like, I'll be 44 years old this year. I don't want to date.
No, it is. And I think that's a problem, or like maybe why some people stay in relationships is because it's like, I mean, because Casey and I have been together going on 5 and married 2 almost. And it's like, it's like if for some, I mean, we are like best friends before anything.
You've been married longer than 2 years.
No. Not even 2 years yet. September 4th, 2021. Yeah.
Was 2021 my last year of photography then?
Yes.
I kept thinking it was 2020.
Nope.
Okay. Oh, no. Okay.
Because 2020 made you realize that you missed a lot of time.
Yeah, 2021. But I didn't book a lot extra in 20. Correct. Like everybody that was on the books, I finished up.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's like we are best friends before we're anything. But it's kind of scary, especially being young, because it's like to get out there and have to get to know someone.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Like, I think that is the scariest part of cutting ties with somebody.
Yeah, I have enough hobbies that my time is filled. Like I'm good.
Yeah.
Like
yes.
But I would never trade what I have for that, of course.
Yes.
But the alternative is kids, your dad's single. Like
right. Yeah.
There's not going to be any. Yeah. But it's if you're in an unhealthy relationship, just do what you can. I'm not going to say it's easy, because that's not fair to people either that are trapped.
No.
But it's okay. That there are, you may not know. Like you said, you've been with Casey for 5 years. Did you know Casey in high school?
No. Like we were friends on Facebook, but it was one of those like I knew one of his friends.
So you just clicked.
So we became friends, and it's like we didn't know each other though. So no, we did not know each other in high school.
Yeah, and it's like my wife. I have no idea she even existed before I met her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just know, even though in a small world kind of thing, like I went to college with one of her best friends from high school. Like she stood up at our wedding. I knew her before I knew my wife.
Well, one of my good friends was Casey's best friend. I mean, he was the best man in our wedding, and he's the one that introduced us. But it was just funny, like all the times that Mason would come to Lewistown and hang out, like Casey never ventured with him.
Right. Yeah, it's like I knew Mason before I knew Casey, and like my wife's bus driver growing up was my great aunt.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, like my grandpa's sister. My grandpa's family's from around here originally, but my grandpa's sister was her bus driver. So it's just like that small world weirdness of it is what it is. But yeah, so that's okay. Like if you're in an unhealthy relationship, or what, maybe not even unhealthy, just a relationship is not, it's sputtered, and the light is not on anymore, it's okay to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Like Larry and Julia did not belong together.
Yeah.
No.
Or you could end up like Julia and Larry.
Right. Yeah, where like Larry's dead and her real lover looks like her husband.
Yeah.
Who then they all end up dying. So there you go.
Right.
If Larry would have decided not to try to patch things up with Julia, he'd still be alive.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So there you go. Next week, I don't know. I don't want to shuffle. I think I picked one. I think I picked one. Because there are so many movies out there, but it's like I don't really want to shuffle because that's what we do for a week. So
yeah,
let's watch. We're gonna stay in the 80s.
Okay.
And this is one of my favorites. I say that about every movie, I feel like. We're going to go back just 1 year to 1986, and we are going to watch the Fred Dekker-directed Night of the Creeps.
Okay.
Night of the Creeps. I love this movie. It's up there with, like, Return of the Living Dead for me.
Okay.
I think I like Return of the Living Dead just a little bit more. But this movie, yeah. Another movie that you aren't going to make this movie any decade but the 80s. But man, is this a fun movie. It's listed on IMDb as a comedy first.
Okay.
Horror and then sci-fi. You've got brain parasites, zombies, and it's just fun. It takes place on a college campus. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Okay. Good special effects. It's fun. I really am impressed with this movie. It's a lot of fun. So we're going to watch 1986's Night of the Creeps for next week. And then that'll be my contribution to the rotation. And then
it's streaming on quite a few places.
Yeah.
Too.
Oh yeah. I hadn't got to that point. Yeah.
I know that you like to list that, so I like to look it up.
So, yeah, Night of the Creeps is streaming on... Give me a second here to look it up. Let's see. You can watch Night of the Creeps if you've got... where's the free streaming at? Actually, it is not available for free.
I was going to say, you just need $4.
Yeah, you can rent it, though. You can rent it at Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Google Play... YouTube, Vudu, Microsoft DirecTV, because that's people's go-to. But there is not a free streaming of Night of the Creeps. But is it a fun one? I love Night of the Creeps. It's one of those, like, I don't ever forget about it, but I'm like, oh yeah, that one. So yeah, as I was talking to my wife, and I'm like, I don't know what to bring, and so she was kind of dropping a couple. And it's like, I like the movies, the one movie she suggested, but I'm like, I want something still a little fun. So Night of the Creeps it is. 1986, Night of the Creeps will be next week's movie.
Alrighty.
Social media-wise, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. We appreciate it. I do want to give a shout-out to we've got a new subscriber on YouTube, and she's very engaged, and I really appreciate that. We look up what her username is really quick. Christine Hale on YouTube. She is subscribed. She's going through a lot of our back channel stuff. She comments a lot on our videos. She's also streaming some on Spotify and sharing her thoughts on the episodes over there. So, Christine Hale, if you're listening, thank you very much, and continue with the engagement. Because there was one day I logged in, I think we had like 7, because I get an email every time someone comments. And it was like 7 emails, all from different episodes. I'm like, she is slamming through these. Good for her.
Look at her.
And so, yeah, keep that up. Like 1 missed call, 5 comments on it.
Ooh.
And so it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
From 2 different people in that one. So yeah, and I go back and I answer. I respond to everybody's comment on there. So Yeah, so that is it for another week of Deducation. Next week we will be back with Night of the Creeps, and we have school next week, a full week of it. Your first 3 days kicked off okay? If you had to grade your first 3 days, what would you grade it?
C.
A C.
Minus.
That's okay. You were spoiled. You were spoiled last year.
I was spoiled last year. Like last year was my first year in kindergarten. Because I came from third grade. My first year in kindergarten was a whole different breed.
Yeah.
Like they were the COVID babies. And then my second year in kindergarten, it was a different breed, but like for the best scenario ever. Like I had half of them coming in reading.
Yeah.
Like they all knew how to write their name. Like it was crazy.
You got spoiled.
Yeah. And so this kindergarten year, I would say like they're just average, like normal kindergarten.
Okay.
Like it's going to take some time.
You got some work to do.
Yeah, but we'll get there.
Yeah. I'm actually ahead of things when it comes to like
there you go.
rostering.
Don't speak that out loud.
No, well, I have plenty to do, but like I'm getting a little ahead, so that's good. And then I have 2 classes this year instead of 3, and everybody's engaged, and it's going well. So I'm also happy with how it's going thus far. So, well, for another week of Deducation, we'll see you guys next week. I'm Mike.
And I'm Courtney.
And you have a great week.
Bye.